I mean, it's one of those mechs from Frostpunk. Pretty much. We're gonna ride the automaton. I confess I gaped like a simpleton when Monsieur Jokinen showed us the enormous contraption that would lead the polar expedition. We called it the Ice Walker, he said, patting one of the enormous metal skis attached to the machine's underside. I glanced at Monsieur Fogg, who merely nodded to himself and said, "Adequate." Monsieur Jokinen covered a slight smile with one graceful mittened hand. The machine was vaguely boat-shaped, with a pilot's bubble of reinforced glass at the front. Thick fur covered the joints, fuel lines, and boilers to insulate them from the cold. The hull itself resembled that of a coach, used by the Pomor people for Arctic hunting. Rounded lines, an additional layer of flush skin planking, a protective false keel. It looks like a death trap, no. Who designed this marvel? I asked absently, still absorbed in studying the angles and curves of the machine. She is a result of 3 years of work and hundreds of artificers' ingenuity and sweat, Monsieur Jokinen said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. Is this the Guild's first polar expedition? I could see him consider lying, but he discarded the impulse. No, he did not elaborate. Even this expedition is quite secret. Why keep it that way? Surely it is obvious. He laughed. Words. His laugh sounded rough, almost unamused. The Guild is far too pompous to let the public know its failures. Monsieur Fogg cleared his throat behind me. Let us go aboard, Passepartout. His eyes looked overly bright. Overly bright? No, not fevered. But eager. It was unsettling to see him like this. I was so used to his mask of cool indifference to the triumphs and disasters that had beset us. We settled in and heard 2 sharp whistles that signaled our departure. With a rumble of boilers and a crack of ice, we began our expedition into the uncharted peril of the Arctic. I could not help but wonder whether we would arrive in London within 40 days and surprise everyone at the Reform Club quite out of their hats. The thought was thrilling, if still distant. I turned the whale oil lamps down low and climbed into bed, but it was a long time before I fell into sleep. Yeah, let's groom Fogg as much as possible. Gotta keep his health up. Cause, yeah, it's a dangerous trip. We stopped at the nearby bay of Virgohamna to add a large tethered balloon to our convoy, to be used for meteorological readings and short explorations. A lone artificer manned the small hangar that jutted up from the icy beach and glared at the ice walker. What a vulgar contraption. That surprises me for an artificer, I remarked, but the man looked unimpressed by my observation. Any fool can see it's vulgar. Even an artificer could. He stuck out his hands. I'm Salomon Auguste André. I proposed that we take my balloon all the way to the North Pole, but the council requisitioned it as mere support and ordered me to stay behind. Supporting an expedition is no minor thing, I cried. I'm sure we'll need all the support we can receive. You need leaders with spine and vision, Monsieur André corrected, and the council have shown themselves lacking in both. Perhaps you should stow away. Oh yeah, I suggested, wondering if this man might be of use to us. He seized my hands in gratitude, and we formulated a plan in hasty murmurs. I would feign violent illness in the galley, and when the crew was distracted, Monsieur Andre would stow away in the balloon. I timed my little episode to perfection and entirely disrupted the Artificer's patrols. Monsieur Andre slipped on board in the confusion, even managing to wave a little handkerchief down at me from his lofty perch. Okay, we got a stowaway aboard. But you never know, that could be helpful. Let's do some more grooming. It's more important than talking to anyone. I awoke early and paid a quick visit to Monsieur Andre up in his balloon. Ah, Passepartout, I can never repay you for this. Do you need food? Other help? My balloon is well supplied. I made sure of that before the others came to take her. If you all die, I will escape. Do not worry yourself on my account. I was somewhat unnerved by that, and so I was happy when we agreed that I would not return again unless there was a dire emergency. I slipped away, whistling a little jaunty tune. At breakfast, Monsieur Jokinen introduced us to our fellow expeditionists. I paid particular attention to Bogdan Mezensky, the leader of the formidable Pomor hunters, who manned the harpoons. We'll be supplying provisions until we're away from land anyway, he rasped. Then we'll hunt whales, of course. But of course, I agreed, attempting to appear knowledgeable. Indeed, Monsieur Mezensky, and Monsieur Jokinen exchanged quiet smiles, though I think you will be a little surprised all the same. I am not overfond of surprises. This will be a fun surprise, unless you are squeamish about blood. The Artificer saw the sudden pallor of my face. Ah, forget I said anything. The Pomor hunter snorted, eyeing me like an errant child. Monsieur Jokinen made a sympathetic face behind the man's back. So we're now sharp. On my character designation changed. So I think I could be wrong about this, but the way you shape up your character, that determines what dialogue options you get. I think they are on a top to bottom scale in terms of your abilities. I'm not entirely certain. I don't remember. But anyways, so I don't remember how good or bad this is. Do whatever we can to keep Fogg's health up. No point in conversation here, I think. Halfway through the afternoon, we fetched up at an icy cliff, far too sheer to be assayed by the Ice Walker's skis. Was this anticipated? I asked aloud, peering out from the thick glass windows of the bridge. Nothing on this route is anticipated, Monsieur Jokinen replied. No one has ever been this way before. With that, he pulled a lever of gleaming wood. We lurched down with a mechanical hiss, and the engines hummed at a higher pitch. I studied my master, who looked perhaps a little more grimly calm than usual at our abrupt motion. I tightened my grip on the nearby handhold. Out of the window I saw the mechanical skis bend and articulate. They must have had hidden joints, forming themselves into sharp claws which dug into the pack ice. We scuttled up the ice face. There is no other word to describe it. The Ice Walker swung and hissed and spewed steam in great shrieking gouts, but we made it up in less than 5 minutes. Next time, Monsieur Jokinen put in jovially, buckle up. I was, in the end, grateful for the Artificer's foresight in designing such a contraption. Now that the gut-wrenching terror had passed, it did seem like quite a jolly adventure. This is, by the way, the most dangerous path in the game. Go figure. But you know, we're gonna go to the North Pole. Santa is gonna give us presents and everything. The coast of Spitsbergen disappeared into our wake. There was no land between here and the pole, or none that had been discovered. It was entirely possible that there was nothing but frozen ocean and endless sky ahead. It was a night in the Arctic, a 4-month-long night, relieved only by the way the snow gathered up and reflected what little light there was, and the brief auroral rosiness of the sky at midday. It was quiet and still, beautiful in a spare, brutal sort of way. It was as though I could look out upon the vista and unmoor myself, let myself melt and drift and shiver into the wide spaces below. Behind us are the little clustered lights of civilization, and only unrelieved whiteness lies ahead. Fair enough, Warnet. This is true. The most exciting route could be the one that gets you killed. But there are many adventures to be had in this game. But since Cambridge opened up, I wanted to try it. We can talk to someone. Madame Juho. Let's talk about the North Pole. You have nothing to say. Can we go from the North Pole to Gastown? From the North Pole to Honolulu? Why are you here? Duty. Let's go to Omsk. To Reykjavik. Goodbye. Did we learn a new path? No. I mean, finding connecting travels from the North Pole might be a challenge. Just saying. I was heating Monsieur Fogg's shaving water to a precise degree, when I heard a long trumpet blast and the sound of many boots thumping in the corridor. I gave Monsieur Fogg a beseeching look, and he scratched his chin pointedly, before tightening his lips. "Oh, very well, Passepartout," he said. "Go investigate." I followed the sound of boots to a brightly lit room at the very aft of the ship. Monsieur Mezensky was shouting commands to his group of Pomor hunters, but paused to toss a glare in my direction. "What are you doing here, civilian?" "I came to join you," I announced, somewhat to my own surprise. Really, for a moment I thought he would dismiss me, and straightened my shoulders, and attempted to look like a competent fellow in a mysterious crisis. Instead, Monsieur Mezensky glanced at a panel of furiously blinking lights and sighed. "It is too late." He pushed me aside and scaled the bulkhead behind me with a grunt. A moment later, the floor beneath my feet began to hum. Merde! I shouted. How did I continually find myself in the midst of these misadventures? The Pomor huntsman pulled me into the chair next to him and buckled me in place with what I can only describe as unnecessary viciousness. I remained silent in awareness that I was intruding. All these hunters were warmly outfitted, heavily armed, and grim-faced. The hum reached a crescendo, and there was a stomach-churning wrench as the room detached from the ice walker and pitched into the air. It was a gyrocopter masquerading as a ready room. I leaned towards the observation windows. A slash of pale sky, roiling ice-shrouded ocean, and was that Zittelors? There she blows, Monsieur Mezensky pointed, and elbowed me in the side. Isn't that what you English say when you spot a whale? I am not English, I said, and the repetition of that commonplace made me feel a little better. One of Monsieur Mezensky's hunters shouted a phrase in Russian, and there was a scramble. A hunter opened a hatch in the ceiling and clambered up to man the mounted harpoon. Another shouted out the direction and heading of the whale to the pilot. What can I do to help? I asked, gathering my courage. Nothing, Monsieur Mezensky rumbled. Now shut up and stay out of the way. I could see... the spotters pressing their faces to the window and attempting to divine the whale's next move. There was a hiss of a harpoon launch, a shout of triumph. Our craft shuddered and swung. The instruments span wildly. The harpooner had hit home. A thick rope cable connected us to our quarry. It thrashed in pain, jerking us along with it as its blood darkened the water. Oh dear. We did it, I shouted triumphantly. The hunters, if anything, looked grimmer than ever and tightened their buckles. Another harpoon hiss. A roar of pain, and suddenly we were not simply flung, but tumbling through the sky. I braced my feet against the chair legs and put my head between my legs, preparing for a crash landing. Monsieur Mezensky was shouting commands at his team of hunters. A scream penetrated through my haze of dizziness, and I looked up in time to see one of the harpooneers miss his grip and fall away. Oh no, a tiny black dot against sky and sea. I heard Monsieur Mezensky curse and try to unbuckle his belt, his eyes on the ceiling hatch. I lunged for the ladder first, and he was so astonished that he did not pull me back until it was too late. He was needed below to organize and command. I had acted out of pure practicality. I could almost hear my dear mamma's voice in my head, lamenting my flair for the dramatic. Oh boy, 1 second. Fine. Ah. Stupid firewall. What are you complaining about now? Anyways, yeah. Flair for the dramatic. The Arctic wind... It's not on there now. The Arctic wind burned my cheeks, and the salt spray from the sea was quickly soaking my mittens. I clung to the harpoon and swung it to aim at the whale. Taking the time to steady myself against the gyrocopter's pitching. The harpoon flew forth, striking the beast in its very vitals. Blood gushed out in great gouts. It keened once more and rolled over. The harpoon cable went taut, and there was a terrific jerk. As though through smoked glass or a smeared camera lens, I saw my mittened hands slip on the lever. I felt rather than heard a scream tear itself out of my throat as I plummeted through the air into the dark, freezing ocean below. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. This could be bad. Apparently I can still groom fog. You goat-faced idiot, Monsieur Mezensky shouted as I blinked my eyes open. I was only going to close the hatch. There was no need to harpoon the beast again. Oh, I am not dead. I felt a detached sort of surprise at the notion. You very nearly killed yourself, is what you did. Bloody civilian. His cheeks purpled and puffed out. Next time, leave the harpooning to the harpooneers. Oui, monsieur. I huddled deeper into the covers, feeling quite chastised. Monsieur Mezensky cursed at a filthy string. Then he shook my hand. Don't get any ideas, he added, before sweeping out of the room. I still think you are an idiot. So, the reason I went on that whole adventure was to try to get friendships with these hunters. I think I failed. Anyways, I fought the tiredness and looked around. I thought I saw my master's still drawn face, but I was sound asleep before I could even call out. The ice walker, I noted, was moving once more. Onwards we go. Oh yeah, and Grim Fog. Oh, didn't get the chance. A set of mechanical pincers emerged from the back of the ice walker, grabbed up the whale's carcass from the water, and pulled it into its gaping maw. The artificers told me that it would be processed for fuel on our journey ever north. I went down to observe more closely, standing on one of the metal walkways aboard the rendering station. It was as though the ice walker itself was consuming the whale. A vast array of pipes pierced into the corpse, sucking out whale oil in great heaving gulps. Long blades whirred and sliced, chopping blubber away from the meat. The crew carted the blubber to copper kettles in great troughs, rendering it down in kilns which smoked fiercely. It was strangely marvelous, a concert of machine and man, which was both elegant and practiced. I could not stop thinking about it, even as I lay in my berth that night, and the smell of oil and blood chased me into my dreams. Okay, onwards we go. I mean, Fog is still above 90 health, so he's fine. Can be a bit scary otherwise, but we had all the winter clothing, so I think we're gonna be fine. Monsieur Fogg had managed to find himself a whist partner from amongst the artificer's ranks. It was an arcane talent of his, and one I greatly envied. If only I could so easily find contentment, mes amis. The fellow in question was a youth of barely 20, handsome enough in a pallid-eyed sort of mode, and apparently some sort of meteorological prodigy. I wished him joy of partnering with my master, and took myself off for a turn about the decks, and later a little drink at the illicit still in the cargo hold. Moonshine on the North Pole. Perfect. Room some more. There we go, he's now at 100% health, despite us going to the North Pole. Ah, there you are, Passepartout, Monsieur Jokinen flashed me a bright smile. Would you like to come up in the balloon with me this afternoon? We need some meteorological readings, but we could make a picnic of it. Oh yeah! Oh yeah, and I remember now. It is possible, if you go to a specific locations, I believe it is possible to woo Monsieur Jokinen. Which starts about here, I think. I agreed fervently. Rather glad of his company. An hour later, we were climbing the swinging rope ladder up to the tethered balloon. I shivered and resisted the urge to look down. We were a long way up, and I could not help but recall my recent terrifying fall from the whale hunter's gyrocopter. Monsieur Jokinen pulled himself into the gondola and extended a hand. I let him help me up, but managed to catch my knee on the edge of his long coat and tumble us together in a heap. It seems I have fallen for you, monsieur, I jested, trying to catch my breath. He laughed as we picked ourselves up and cast me a look under his lashes. Call me Vitty, eh? Surely we know each other that well by now. He excused himself to cast off and set up the instruments. In the meanwhile, I set out the lunch of whale meat and oatmeal as prettily as I could, given the circumstances. I even managed to scrounge up a little tallow candle, or a touch of the romantic, of course. Then I went up to the observation deck and joined Vitty at the railing. The ice walker was still visible, a hulking shape belching dark smoke. into the misty white. We were suspended in an endless sky, in a moment of calmness. I shuddered, feeling strangely adrift. Whitty cast me an almost shy smile, and we ducked back down into the warmth for an amiable lunch. What do you know? So, as I mentioned before, there are a handful of paths you can take to find love in this game, with a number of characters. This is one of them, if I remember right. Today, the Ice Walker's pilot threw a cloudberry pie at the chief navigator's face at lunch. Okay, a fine berry, the cloudberry. It grows only on the edges of swamps, and generally the kind of swamp that does not advertise where exactly those edges are. It is not uncommon, I'm told, for novice cloudberry pickers to lose a boot as they collect. But I digress. But I digress. I eavesdropped upon their argument shamelessly. The crew of the matter seemed to be that we were a few degrees off course, and they each blamed each other. Uh-oh. Are we hopelessly lost? I stood up unsteadily. Will we perish? The pilot gave me a pitying look. No, we have plenty of fuel, and it is easily enough corrected. The chief navigator threw a set of charts at the pilot. Read them. Double check if you like. I gave you the correct heading. And I followed your instructions perfectly, the pilot. Perfectly. The pilot let the papers fall to the floor. Then how did we end up off course? The navigator crossed her arms. Answer me that. Perhaps it was sabotage. There was a horrible silence after my suggestion, and I resisted the urge to shuffle my feet. We are the only ones here, the pilot said slowly. You think one of us did it? Uh-oh. Betrayal usually comes from within. Let us not point fingers, the chief navigator declared, extending her hand in a gesture of reconciliation, and the pilot shook it. Let us keep our wits about us, she added, and move forward. Uh-oh, so now we're lost up in the Arctic. That's not a good sign. We're getting there though. Day 19. It's taking a lot of time. But it is an Arctic expedition after all. Today... I investigated our unplanned detour, but learned little of any value. The navigational charts were not guarded or locked away, and the various instruments used for the purpose so delicate and complex that any one of them could easily malfunction. I bribed an apprentice navigator to keep his eye out for anything unusual, trying to shake the feeling that I had just thrown my money down a lightless echoing well. But you gotta be certain, right? You never know. So bribe the right people. Perhaps we'll get through this after all.